We may have several videos on this one, and creating, and again, what this promotes is this idea of a separation of concerns. So you've got one group that can be focusing on the front end, you can have another group that can focusing on the back end, and maybe another group that's focusing on the data, and you can work on a larger application with multiple groups working at the same time. Let's get to it. All right, so where we left off, we have this basic structure, and if you notice, we have our bookstore. It doesn't do much. All we can do now is navigate between pages. It says all this stuff works. These are kind of like, think about them as blanks or templates, placeholders. And this is okay, but it'd be nice if at least in all of our pages, we were connected to some kind of base page. And this idea of a base page is okay to get started with, but we're going to replace it as we move forward. So again, we want to create a new partial page called a base page. Base page, okay? Just want to think what that is for a second. Let's do it. So again, NGGC, we're going to go into partials, and we're going to call this the base page. Okay? So it's going to be the base page component. That's how it's going to be looking like. Okay? And then enter. So it scaffolds out this base page component. It's going to be inside of our partials. Let's take a look and see what we're going to do with it now. So inside of our base page component, we have this. And inside here, I want to inject in all of our base pages a string, right, for our title, okay? A title string, if you will. So we can do that on something called the onInit area, where we can change the title to whatever that is. Remember that this is a class, so I can have a property here for our base page component called title. And our title can be of type string. It can be explicit this way, okay? And let's just use a, by the way, we can always use a linter to fix any of these weird problems. It'll say, hey, fix this. We are upset that you put in an extra space in there. It'll just remove the space. Okay, so that's what this does. And in our constructor, we have nothing to put in here right now, but in our onInit, what happens if you notice that every component implements an onInit method. It's actually an interface, which forces us, every page that has it's a component, it forces us to have this onInit method, which actually triggers when this page launches. So why is that? Well, we're not really instantiating pages. They're actually being created on the fly as the object gets created. So we need something that triggers immediately. And instead of polluting the constructor, which is what we don't want to do here in Angular, we use the onInit to do that for us. So we're going to say that this .title, this is some code, is equal to the title of the root. That's what we want, the title of the root. And in order for us to do this, we're going to borrow from the Angular route for a second. We're going to do our first import. We're going to say we're going to import from activated route, right? And it's going to come from Angular /router, okay? So what this activated route does is it allows us to connect to the current route where we are, and it gives us some information about the current route. For example, the home page. So we're going to say that the title, which is the title of the page, we can say that this is equal to this.route. And by the way, we need to put route as another property. We're going to put that in the constructor. We're going to use private route, activated route. So, okay, what did we just do there? When we put the keyword private inside of a constructor, we're not used to doing that. Typically, we just put in the parameter. But what private or public does, it's a shortcut. It's like we're doing this. This.route is equal to route, and it's private. Okay, that's what this is. Instead of doing it separately. If I didn't want to use private, I could do it the long way, and it would look something that looks like this. I would say route, this is the long way. which is of type activated route, okay, which is private. Okay, this is the structure we can use. And then inside of our constructor function, which is in here, right, we can say that this dot route is equal to route. So this structure, this dot route is equal to route, is the exact same way in TypeScript by just doing this. And now we don't have to do this anymore. And we don't have to do this anymore. Okay, we just do that in one blow. That's how, because we know that Angular knows that this is something that happens on a regular basis. So they've made a construct for this here. Okay. And let's just get rid of some of these things, because Angular doesn't like when a constructor is completely empty. We're not using the constructor for anything. So we're just going to make it so that it's on one line. All right, good. So then we can say that now that we have a route, which is the activated route, we're going to say, okay, let's look at this dot route. And we want to look at the snapshot of that particular route. We want to get the data dot title from that particular route. So where is the data title coming from? Well, it doesn't come from anywhere right now because we haven't injected it. And I want to talk about injection for a second, right? So remember that there is no real pages that are happening here. This is exactly what we've done with Express this entire semester. This is a single page application, and we're smashing together the pages. We're composing the pages in real time. Whenever we, we go from one page to the other, we're using JavaScript to inject them, and that's why we get good responsiveness. The front end is taking care of a lot of the work. Before us doing a round trip and going to the back end, we're doing a lot of precursor stuff on the front end, and we're doing that with a responsive front end. And I mean responsive as in like reactive, right? And we'll talk about that in a bit. So where is this data title coming from? Well, it's not coming from anywhere. It's got to come from the router. So that's what's happening. It says, hey, router, give me the data title. Okay, so think about this as a data package. And I can get that if I go to app routing module. I don't have any data packages that I've put there, but we can put them in. So every time we go to a route, and this is kind of a very simple way of doing it, we can have a little data package. So we can say that, hey, we go to the route, I want a data package that looks like this. It has a title component with a title of home. So I'm specifying what the title is supposed to be when I move to this, home. And I can do the same thing with all of the rest of them. So all the routes are going to have a little data component, similar to what we did on Express, how we sent a package of data to the Express, to each route in Express. We're doing the same thing here, but what we're doing here is we're specifying the title here. Just a centralized location for it, that's all. Product, services, that'll be okay. And contact. There we go. So that's the title. So that's going to come in from here. So it comes from here, and it goes into our base component. And what did I mess up? It goes into our base component, and our base component receives the title and assigns it to this title object, this one. Okay? So now this is interesting. This is the first time we're going to do some injection. So if I go to the partial page now, so the HTML side, right now this just says base page works. But we don't want that to happen. We want a little Jumbotron. So the way the Jumbotron works is it's a div with a class of container. Remember this? And inside there we have a div with a class of Jumbotron. Right, and inside that we have an h1 tag with a class of display-4, and what does that look like? Well, we want to say something like welcome to, and then here's the injection. We're going to use the double mustache, and like this. Anytime you see a double mustache, this means take a variable from our code behind file, the component.ts file, and inject it right here. Similar, very, very similar to what we did with Express. So title is an object that we're going to get from our router. It's going to pass into our component, our base component.ts file, which is going to then be injected in here. That's how it works. So this is the injection. And once we have this, this Jumbotron is going to be part of the base component. Okay, cool. So we've done the base component, but we don't see anything. We're not going to see anything in the base component. There is no route to get there or anything like that. How do we link it to the rest of the components? Well, let's link it to our home page first. So how does this work? So our home page then is going to, let's just go to our home page now. So we're going to go to, we're leaving partials, bar base component's done. I'm going to go to my home component, and in my home component, I'm going to compose a new object. I'm going to say import, and I want to import the base page component from, and I'll think about what this is. This is, I could use relative pathing if I want to. So I could go dot slash, and then I could say it's not there, dot slash. It's going to come from partials, and then inside partials is the base page component, which is the base page component. So I could do that. That's perfectly fine to do. So now I have access to that base page component. So now my class, instead of it implementing on an it and nothing else, I can also extend the base page component, right? Which means that my page, my home page, is a base page component, plus it has everything else, right? Now, whenever we do any kind of extension, we have to call the super constructor, just like we normally would in any class. We're going to call super, and we're going to pass in there the activated root. It requires the activated root. But we don't have an activated root, which means we also have to inject our activated root here as well. So we're going to say activated root. You can see we put that in there, and it actually injected that for us. As soon as we typed it in, it was like, woo, here it is, right? And we want to say that in here, we're going to take the root, which is the activated root, and we're going to pass it through the home component into the base page component, and that's how it's going to work. So this is so far so good. There's nothing else that you see in here. In fact, there's nothing else that this component needs to do, just this. Okay, great, but how does that help us, and why do we do that? Why do we spend all that time doing that at all? I thought we were supposed to be talking about this other stuff. Well, we know that the app base page component is now available for us to use as a template item, which means that inside of our HTML, instead of putting PageWorks, we could put in app base page. So now app base page is something that our base page, our home component, can use as a new selector, something that is the Jumbotron with the title. If I go back out to here now, and it says failed. Let's see why it failed. So it says partials, base page component error, identifier expected. Oh yeah, we didn't save something. So save, and now it's back. And if I go to home, you should see, instead of the home component, we should see a save happening any minute now. Home component here, we want to save, and let's just go make sure that we're scaffolding it out, and now we're good. Welcome to, and then some kind of page. We want to make sure that this page works. It should say welcome to, and then the component. Let's look and let's do an inspect and see if there's any errors. So we have Angular is running this. It looks like it's pretty good, but something is amiss. Why? We've got our base page component, but we don't have the information that's coming through. Okay. let's go back and check to see if we've done everything properly. So we're saying this title is equal to root snapshot data title. It's going to take the data title and inject it into here. That's what we want to do. Let me make sure that we've got everything correct for this. And I want to make sure that our we also have the same stuff inside of our partials. I'm just checking my notes to make sure that this is good. I found that this was really helpful when I was doing it the first time. So let's check our HTML to make sure that that's correct. So a double mustache with title in there. That looks okay, right? But we're not getting a value for title. Why is that? That's the key. So here is where we're expecting a value for title that's coming in, data.title, but we're not getting anything in here whatsoever. Okay, let's see why that is. So this all looks good. There's no errors here so far. I'm just going to look at the base page component and make sure that we're good. I'm just looking at my documentation. We're looking at activated root and the base page component itself. This is looking pretty good. How about the home component? What is wrong with this? There might be something wrong here. Let's take a look at that home component and make sure that that is not going to drive me nuts now. Home component. All right, let's go through it. So we injected the Angular core stuff, our base page component, our activated route. We have our app home, as well as this part. We're extending our base page component, and we're going into this. So far that looks all grand, right? It looks like it's all good, actually. All right, maybe it's our route. And again, this is where we have to, I'm just checking to see if everything is good, because I want to make sure that we have what we need to have in order for this to function properly. Title. Let's go into our module here. So, okay, so we have a couple things. We have our inside of our routing module. Here's our routing module, this part here. These are our core pieces, ng module and routes and router module. Home, about, products, services, and contact. Those things we need. And then we have our routes, just making sure. Component, home component, data is title, and that is home. And we have our imports, router module, okay, and our app routing module is at the bottom. This looks all good, by the way. And then I want to go and look at the next part is looking at the other components, the outside components, to make sure that they're all configured properly. All right, and this is the kind of the process that I go through when I do troubleshooting. I kind of look at the base problem and then try and go from there. So looking at the app module at this point, and we have ng module, we have the app routing module. I'm going to take that and separate it. That's what this part is. We have app component, header component. We have all these other little pages and stuff inside of here. We have a bunch of declarations, app, header, footer. Oh, see, now what's happened is our base page component has not been injected inside of our declarations, except for when it comes down here. I don't think the order matters. In fact, I'm sure it doesn't. Our imports are our browser module and the app routing module. Our providers are nothing. And this looks pretty good. So let's go to the app.ts page and make sure that there's nothing in there that has to be modified. Pretty sure that this is pretty good. I'm just going to save this. And I'm going to save this. Doesn't look like there's anything in here. I'm going to save everything. Sometimes what happens is when you go through and you check, you've broken something because you haven't saved it, and let's just check back and see. I'm not going to be suffering too much because it could be that, yeah, there we go. So that was all it is. It just didn't need to be saved. It was all fine. It just, something wasn't saved. But it's good to check, to go through it all and see what's happening here. So now you can see that if I go to home, I have this, and we have a pattern that we can use for about, product, services, and contact. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go and put those pieces back in, and then we're going to start building up our store. So just like we did for the home component, I'm going to do the same thing for the other components. I'm going to say that the about component is also extending. Let's see if we can do it in a different way. Extends the base page component, right? And if I go here, what I can do is I can use this to import the things that I need. When it extends, like we did before, we need to have also a router, right? Which is the activated route. That's what we need. So route, which is the activated route. And we don't have activated route, so we're going to add the missing activated route call. And then from there, we're going to call super, and we're passing in the route. And that should satisfy requirements. And let's just check to see how good we did compared to the home component. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty good. Activated routes down here. We did this out here, and it looks almost identical. The only difference is that when we installed the activated route, it put src in here as opposed to, so the source folder, as opposed to partials. And I'd like to actually do it differently. I like to do this, partials, which is relative path. I'm just a stickler for that kind of stuff. All right, so now the other thing we have to do is in here, we can just put in the base page component, right? So that is something that gets added in. Let's try that again. So app base page is what we're looking at. That's the selector. Okay, and now when we go back to our page and we go to about, then we should have about. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the other ones. Okay, I'm just going to work diligently here to get this done so we get back on track with the other stuff that we wanted to do. So same idea, we're just going to keep on doing the same thing. So we're going to extend the base page component. We're going to do that, which we're going to inject. And then what we're going to do is the activated component is the route. Yeah, we need the super call for sure. But we need the activated component now. And it doesn't like that. Sometimes what happens is when you type it, it doesn't take. Activated route is what we meant. And then we're just going to import. There we go. That's good. And that's got that. So about, contact, home, we'll do products and services, and then we're done. So then we'll do the same things. And oh, I have to also put inside the contact area, the HTML, it's got to put app. By the way, the only one that's going to show up is the ones that we can access, app base page. So that's this one, home, products, as an example, is the next one. Let's do that one. So we're going to put in the extends the base page component. Again, we're going to put that into play. Okay, and then we're going to call the super call. Where we're going to pass in route is equal to activated route. And that's good. And what we're going to also do is going to this one and replace with app base page. How about we actually do it properly? And that is products and one more. And then you've seen it a bunch of times now. So extends the base page component. And we'll just do it in one this time. Super constructor route. which is the activated route. Okay. Import, import, and then we can do this part right here and this part right here. So why is this a good thing to do? Why are we doing this? That's the other question you're going to ask. Well, now that we've got our base page component, it's like our kind of the thing we did with our partials, right? We have another component that I can update, and that little component is not a partial component. It actually injects data inside of our base page. All right, so I think that's covered everything. Let's take a look at that now. We should be able to navigate from one page to the other and have some kind of navigation scheme happening here. All right. So that covered what we missed the last time, which is now let's install the other pieces that we need. So I'm going to go to PowerShell here. And we're going to install the mock server that we talked about. So npm install. And okay, again, make sure you're in the client folder. That's important. And if you, otherwise, you'll install in the wrong spot. We have Bootstrap and Font Awesome. We're going to do Json-server. It's kind of a mock server. Minus save, minus dev. That's where that's going to go. And that's in your PowerPoint slides. And we're also going to install JSON Web Token, which is exactly what we talked about, JWT, that allows us to work between our mock server as well as our website, which is going to be very similar to what we're going to be doing with our actual API. So again, it's minus save, minus dev for installing JSON Web Token. All right. Cool, so we've installed all that stuff, and you can see now inside of our package.json file, which is in here, you can see we've installed that stuff as a developer dependency, right? So JSON Web Token and JSON Server are right there. Awesome. The next piece after we've done that is actually to start setting up our, in our package.json, we have a command we can use. We have different scripts. For example, if I want to do ng, that's kind of ng. I can ng serve. I can just do a node start, and it'll do ng serve. A node build, it'll do an ng build. These are shortcuts for what we want to do. But we want to do another shortcut. We want to use something called JSON, just like it says in our PowerPoint. And we want to use JSON-server. And we want to pass in a data.json file, which we don't have yet. We're going to make it -p for the port. We're going to use 3500 because that's our backend right now, -m, and we're going to use auth middleware for this as well. Okay, so that's kind of something that it's telling us to do. And now what we want to have is we want to create a data.js file in the root of our folder somewhere. So again, let's just close all this up. And inside the source, and again, you got to be careful where you do it, because that is what we want to do. We want to create a data.js file somewhere where we can have our mock data. And we're going to actually get our mock data from our database this time around, because we already have kind of data as it is, right? So we don't want to necessarily kind of make it empty. Let's try this out. So, and if we have to move it into our app, we will. But right now, we're just going to put it inside of our main folder in here, our main folder, right? So let's just go into our client folder, or that's one thing it doesn't really say to do inside of the PowerPoint. It doesn't say where to put it, and that's kind of a issue, right? And let's see. just checking my notes again. I make sure that I do this properly for you guys because I want to kind of go over it with you, and I don't want you guys to fret about where it belongs. So yeah. So where it's going to go is inside of our main client file, like I thought. So right in here. So in here, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call it data.js. And the data.js file is going to be something we modularly export. So module.exports. And we talked about this during the course. We can export a function, an anonymous function, right? And what we want this to do is return an object, an anonymous function that returns an object. And what we're going to have here is a series of products or books is what we're going to have, right? So our books folder, books, right? And the books are going to have, they're going to be a bunch of JSON-like files. That's what they're going to be. So let's use our command line to get them. So we're going to go into Mongod like we've had before, right? And we're also going to do another file. We're going to go into Mongo. Here's Mongo. And we're going to go into use bookstore. And we're going to say db.books.find pretty, and this is our data we want. We want all this data, but we want to have access to it here, like kind of in a mock way. So I'm just going to, for now, just going to grab all of this. And we're going to copy it and paste it and fix it. That's the way we're going to do it. All right, so that's how it's going to look. We don't need an ID. This ID, we're going to change this to a number. We can actually keep these here if I want, but I'm just going to put it as 1 or as 0. Kind of similar to what we did in the PowerPoint. 1, 2, and this will be 3. So an actual ID as opposed to an object for, okay, the rest is looking pretty good. I can get rid of some of the extra spaces here that's been injected into our description. That's what's happened. That's why we have that extra space, because when I copied and pasted from Wikipedia, it gave us extra spaces. That's no problem. And then I'm going to add some commas in here just to make it so that this thing doesn't break. There we go. Wonderful. And just select all and then format the document. And we're going to configure a formatter. You know what? I'm thinking about using Prettier to do it, which makes it nice. Excellent. Okay, so that gives us our mock data to some degree. One thing that the bookstore example has that's different than ours is a category or a genre, and that's something that we don't have in our mock data. We don't have a category, but we do have a year, right? So we can specify by year if we do. The category, obviously, this is all science fiction, and we can add additional pieces of data if we really want to. But for now, we're just going to leave it as is. We're going to say it's the year, or the author, or the name. We can specify any of these things, or the price that we can go through. Also at the bottom, we want to start thinking about orders. So here we want also orders as something we want to be able to do. We can make an order of one of these pieces of data. So this is the first part. The first part is kind of mocking up our data. And then what we want to use, we want to do inside of our folder, we want to make another thing called auth middleware. This is again inside this main folder here. So we're going to go into the client and add a new file. We're going to call this auth middleware.js to make sure we spell it properly. Again, I'm just following the example from the PowerPoint slides. Let's rename this thing. And this is going to be our JWT stuff. So const JWT is equal to a require JSON web token. This we've seen before. And const app secret is equal to, we'll call it secret. And const username is equal to admin. We know that that is the username. And const password, that's going to equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's going to be the password. And const mappings, we're going to say that we're going to have a get request, a get mapping, where it is API/orders, and also /orders. We don't have anything like that yet. We're going to put that in place right now. We don't have orders. And for posts, we're going to also do /API products. And in fact, instead of products, we're going to change this to books. And we want actually a book list. We're going to come back to this in a bit. And we also have categories in our example that I'm not going to put in, and we're going to see what it's going to do for us. If I don't put these core mappings in, we're going to play around with this one. We're also going to make a function called requires auth, just like it says, a little helper function, requires auth, where we have a method and a URL. And we're going to return mappings, and we're going to use the method .to lowercase. Or an empty array. That's what we're going to return. And we're going to use a promise. We're going to find the URL that starts with and all right, there we go. So this is going to say that we're going to return whenever we require authorization, requires auth, it's going to go through and check it. Okay. That is our middleware, our auth middleware, to mock up what it's like to do that. So that's the first part of it. We're going to continue. We're going to do a module exports now. And that's going to equal to a function where we're going to get request, response, and next. This is a pattern you've seen before and should be familiar with at this point. And we're going to say that if the request.url ends with /login, which we don't have right now, and the request.method is equal to post, then again, we're just setting up authentication request.body and request.body.name is equal to username, and request.body.password is equal to password. So we're checking to see if the username and password match, is what this is doing. It's the total mockup. Then let the token that we're going to get equals to jwt.sign. Or remember we had that payload. Data is username. I don't know, we got two usernames. Did we make a mistake typing somewhere? Username, yes we did. Data.username, and the expires in is in 1 hour. And we're going to say it's also going to be app secret. That's going to all be part of the payload that we're going to use to sign the token. We're going to respond with JSON, and it's going to be success, true, and the token is the token. That is if the username and password are correct. However, if it's not correct, res.json, we're going to say success fail. Okay, again, this is very similar to what we're saying in the PowerPoint slides at this point. And res.end return. Okay, so that covers our module exports, and it creates this little auth middleware module that's going to help us authenticate when we need to later on. All right, so that covers all of this. We're not quite done because now we covered everything up to the if statement, this outside if statement. Now, what about else? How about, this is a couple pages long, this one. Else if requires auth, request.method, request.url. So make sure if it requires authorization, then let the token equal to the request.headers authorization. That's the header from the page, or nothing. If token dot starts with bearer, and that's remember we talked about this, the bearer token, then that means that we want to get the token. Token is equal to token.substring, 7 characters, token.length, so 7n, and then token.length minus 1. So that's the beginning and end, start and end. It's going to make it, the substring of the token is going to be the token that we're going to get from bearer. That's what that's saying. And then what we're going to do is do a try catch. Let's try that again. Try catch. And in the try area, we're going to do jwt.verify token and the app secret match. So we're going to see that that is true. And then next. And return. Otherwise, catch the error that we're going to get, whatever that error happens to be, and do nothing, which is kind of exactly what we had in our PowerPoint slides at this point, right? So that solves us up to there. And then res.status code. Sorry. Let's make sure that we got this correct here. Yeah. Else if. And did I do this wrong? I did it wrong. This is this part. It goes down here and ends with this. This part is inside there. So that's that, and that's that, and that's that. Good. And that try catch, just make it so that it is formatted properly. I like to do it this way better because then I can see all the closing braces So after this, then we do a res.status code. Status code is equal to 401. So an unauthorized, that's what that is. And res.end and return. And then we're going to go to the next request. Okay, so that is the auth middleware, and you can get this file right out of your PowerPoint slides. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And what we did was we set up the our store so it does what we want it to do. And what we want to do now is, and what they've done is they've set up a few things. One is there's an admin area for the store. There's a store folder as well as a model folder. I like the model folder, the way they kind of set it up in the example. I'm not sure I like the store the way they set it up because they go through a lot of details as to how they want to run this thing. Okay, so let's take a look and see if we can run our little server on the back end right now to see if it works. So control backtick, and let's try this out. We're gonna run the store from here, the back end from here. So we're gonna say that we're gonna do an npm run Json, and we should see it work. So this basically says we're running in the back end on 3500, and let's see how that works. So if we go back to here and I want to look at that, I can go localhost 3500, and we should get our JSON backend. Here's our JSON server, right? So that is what our JSON server looks like. This is a mock server that's running in the background from our little npm, and we can type in something like book list, and we're going to get this. If we go book list 1, and let's make sure that we have the proper book list happening. That would be inside of our data. So data books. Let's try that again. Books 1. And let's make sure we have everything in our routing module, which would be the auth middleware that we want to have in here. We have no books. We have orders. We have posts. Let's see if we can. We have 404 for books. Let's try put it in books. And what we're going to do is stop this and relaunch. You have to do this. And then we can go back here and refresh. And hopefully we're going to get some data. The idea is we're going to get some mock data. If we don't get mock data out of this, then there's a problem. So it says books 1 is not happening. So we have books up here. Let's look at our previous example here to make sure that we have everything functional in our auth middleware. The auth middleware piece is the big one, right? So API, and we have products here. So they kind of put something in here for the posts. So we're going to do that. Books. And they have categories and a bunch of other stuff, but that's where they have products, a book list, and books. And I think we have to restart the server. Doesn't allow us to restart. We have to actually do the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is our mappings right here, right? So mappings to lowercase is what we want. How about we do it properly? Books. We should put it in the way it's supposed to be. Okay, control. That's good. .401. We're not getting anything anymore. How about if we just go back out to this? That works. Okay, so posts, comments. This is an example of how it would work. And profile. Yeah, so this is good. But let's go in with, so what before what it was products 1. That's what it was. And of course there isn't any products 1. We're not returning that. But we do have a book list. Let's try a book list. Book list is also returning nothing. So let's go back to our mock data. So login, authorization, our books. How is this configured? I think we've got everything good. It's just a pathing issue. Pretty sure. And I'm just going to check my documentation one more time to make sure that we're good to go, as I want to make sure that we don't have any issues with what we're doing. So data there. So JSON-server data.js and then -p. So that's what it does inside of our package.json file. So package.json basically says, hey, take a look at the, oh, that's why. Wow. Wow. Okay. .401 error, which is unauthorized. So that's actually a better error. A 401 is not a not found. It's an unauthorized. We can't go to that site. That's what that basically says. So that's a better error, I guess, if you're going to get an error at all. We don't want errors, but data.js is, there's two. There's a data.json, which was this, okay, for a profile and everything else. That's kind of how it works. So we can go to posts, comments, and profile. And a data.js is what we want for this one. So data.js is what we want to put in there. So we want to serve that up. So data.js is looking at this. And I'm just make sure that this is formatted correctly. Module exports function, return books, which is an array of books. And the last part is orders. This is just laid out the way it's laid out. Name, category. Yeah, we're good. This should still work. And at the end, orders. And we don't want this. Or this, for that matter. So that's kind of all of this. But that's not, that's unauthorized. That's something different. Okay, so that's this part. Let me go to my auth middleware now and see what it says. So we are back, and then so -m with this is the port and the auth middleware. Let's make sure that is correct in our package.json. Auth middleware.js. This is all important because otherwise it'll cause an error. And the secret and admin and all this kind of stuff is the way it works. Let's go to that part now and check out if we have everything there. Admin, secret, password. Yeah. The get and post stuff is a little weird because it shows API orders up here with no books, or products. The products actually shows down in here as API. Let's put it back the way it was just to mock up what we have. And then API categories and categories. Let me put that in there too, just in case. So maybe we'll use them, I don't know. API categories and categories. I don't think that's the issue, but hey. Return mappings method to lowercase. So that's what it's going to do. It takes these mappings, we shift them to lowercase or an empty, and then we say if the URL starts with P, whatever the mapping in, and if it's not equal to undefined, then return that URL back into that. And now this is where we had our issue. Module.exports, this big function. And I may be forced to copy paste just because I want to make sure that I didn't mistype something, because it's totally possible when we're copying things longhand. That's why I provide the example for you guys inside the PowerPoint, because it can be quite cumbersome to have this typed out by hand. All right, so now we know that the module.exports piece is the exact same. And I'm not getting any errors. Let's just do it again. Okay, books and orders is what we're looking at. Books and orders. So we should be able to do that now. It tells us what it is. So books, orders, books 1. It doesn't work, but books does work. That's the entire books list. Books. All right. Oh, and I know why. Oh, I know why. Because we used underscore ID, and here what we're looking for is the ID, which doesn't exist. Yeah. So we're finding an object. We're logging in, and what's happening is we're searching for an object with an ID of something or another, right? That's how it works. So pretty sure we have to change that to ID in a second. I'm not seeing a place here where we can configure the URL to be different off the top of my head. Pretty sure that's the case. Let me make sure. I'm just taking another little thing. Ends with login. We don't care about that because this is just logging in and logging out. I don't see anything here whatsoever. Starts with P. Yeah. So let's go back and change that data. Let's change the data.js and make this ID. I don't think that's going to matter. But hey, you never can tell. Respond. Okay, so we have to reboot the server. That's good. And what if I type in 1 now? That's it. So it is that. It has to do with the ID, not the underscore ID, and that's fine. Whew, that took us a long time, but the great thing is we have an understanding of how the backend works, which is an important part if we're going to mock up data. Excellent. All right, so that is really it for this video. I think what we've covered is our backend. It took about an hour to do properly and set up our bookstore, as well as in this video we also set up our not just the backend but also a base page component for the rest of our application. So now we're ready to go with our continuously building our bookstore from here.